Hello everyone, welcome to my video in which I present to you a time-lapse recording of one of my panel artworks for chapter 10 of the Wormworld Saga. We're going to see in this recording the creation of panel number 11, which you can see here. And the recording process was done by taking screenshots from my workspace every 3 seconds. The whole time-lapse recording covers about 2.5 hours of work. I hope you enjoy it, and yeah, let's get started. Alright, so we start the painting process by blocking out and filling the different color areas of the image. So every material in the image, anything that needs to be painted more or less separately in the following painting process gets selected based on the preliminary drawing and then gets filled with a color. And all these color fills lie on separate layers in my painting software, which is Photoshop. And you can protect these layers so that so if you paint on them, you won't paint over the edges. And this initial step, which always takes a bunch of time, is incredibly helpful in the end, because if these color areas are defined once, you can very quickly switch between them in your painting process, and yeah, you can just be sure that you don't paint over the edges, which makes for a much more relaxed and quicker painting process. This process is very common, not only in painting but also in more traditional comics coloring, and this process is called flatting because you're filling all these shapes and areas with flat colors. And now I'm starting to flat the background, the mushrooms that grow on the larger mushrooms all get their own layers so that I can easily access them at a later point. Now the background. And now I'm already starting to add local color to these different shapes. So what you see here are not individual layers anymore. I'm now working on the layers that I have created in the flatting process. And you can see that I'm painting in them with a paintbrush. Sometimes I'm adjusting the intensity. And here I'm starting to block in a diffuse lighting. So some darker tones of the local color just to create some lighting, basic lighting effect. Here I'm differentiating the local color with the guns and some basic shading on the mushrooms in the background. You will see me jump around the scene a lot. Here I'm adding local color to the costumes. And now, because I have all those areas locked in their own layers, I can really quickly add those local color variations. Some color adjustments. I've now added an adjustment layer on top of all other layers. And now I'm basically just painting with one color, with black. No, it's white, because I'm revealing the adjustment, which is a darkening of the whole painting, and only where I paint into the mask of this adjustment layer, I am now darkening everything below it. This is even quicker than painting those shadings in the individual layers. I have one general shading layer on top, and at a later point I merge these shading informations with the individual layers so that they, again, this information lies in its own layer. And I will do the same now with a lighter adjustment. So I started with a darker adjustment for making some shadows, and now I have a lighter adjustment layer that creates some highlights on the surfaces. And again, it's a global adjustment layer that just lies over everything, and it is then added to all individual layers. Now some basic shading work in the background. So my light situation is pretty diffuse. There is some diffuse light from top right, I would say, but nothing very intense. I'm just making sure that the surfaces that show to the top right get a little bit brighter, and that surfaces that face away from the top right get darker. And here some highlights on the ground, further establishing this lighting situation. Some more darks. Basically the whole painting process now is from the base middle color that I established in the color flatting, I go towards the lighter colors for the highlights and towards the darker colors for the shadows, and I just repeat this process all over the image. Now I'm in the ivy growth in the background, some mushroom shadows, some highlights again. And the fact that everything sits on its own layer makes it very easy for me to put shading on all these different elements without worrying too much about painting over the borders. So now I'm putting more detail into the ground. This mossy, grassy surface. I try to keep it a little bit painterly. I use single brush strokes to create single leaves of grass, but I don't worry a lot about making them super clean shapes. I still like to use the shape of the brush to create these elements and not render too much. So more contrast in the ivy. And now I'm adjusting the shading in the front figure a little bit. Some more drop shadows, defining the form a little bit better. Blending. Some more contrast in the boots. So now the image is in the phase where you balance out the different contrasts to define the forms, to make it more haptic. Some broken color highlights in the metal cap of the boot, a little bluish, might be a reflection from the sky. More details in the grass. I want to make sure that the patch of grass that the foremost foot is standing on looks like being more in the foreground than the patch where the other foot, the left foot of the character, is standing. And now on the other smaller characters, I repeat the process where I refine the contrast, the shading. They are much smaller in the panel, so I can be more loose on them. Some more costume details here and there. The little slits. There I forgot a shape of this red bandages. But those characters are now pretty much completed. Now I do something interesting. I create a depth mask of the whole scene. For that, I again use the layers that I already had of the different elements. And what I try now is to color these layers so that they get lighter the further away they go into the background. So the things that are in the foreground are dark, and the further away from the camera, so to say, an object gets, the lighter it gets in this mask. And now I can use this mask to introduce, and here I just add the mushrooms and the tree trunks, and now I can use this mask to introduce some fog into the scene. This is a concept that I took from 3D graphics, from composing 3D rendered components. In a 3D scene, you can very easily create a depth mask. And with a little bit of handiwork, you can do that for a 2D illustration too. And it gives you a lot of creative freedom, and you can experiment with the different effects. Now I put some more details into the metal surfaces. And here on a separate layer, I paint a little bit of humidity, a little bit of fog. Now I'm in the detailing phase, creating some dried leaves on the ground, some more highlights on all the different elements in the scene. I'm now working on top of everything. This is the final retouch layer where I just paint over everything, and I refine the edges here, the edge detail of the ivy. This is stuff that happens at the very end. I don't even try to bother about it in earlier stages, because I know I have to have all effects like the fog and everything in place before rendering detail like that makes any sense. Yeah. More contrast, more detail. Here the little grass blades that sit in front of the feet. And some more contrast here and there. I'm jumping left and right all over the painting, and just what catches my attention gets fixed or adjusted. Now some more little mushrooms growing here to also add some more color variation to the whole scene. And some fog behind the characters to make them pop out a little bit. And there we are. This is the finished illustration. It took, like I said, about 2.5 hours. And this is an average time for a panel of the Wormworld Saga of that size. This is like the smallest size a panel can have. Okay. I hope you enjoyed watching this. I definitely plan to do more of these in the future, because I figured out a way to record this in a very convenient way that doesn't collide with my working too much. It's much easier for me to make those periodical screenshots. I'm using a tool called timelapse for that. It just records screenshots in a given time interval, and I can easily skip through those screenshots and do a first run of editing that way. It's very convenient, and I will definitely do more of that in the future. So yeah, if you enjoyed this, you can look forward to more of that stuff coming up. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time, and yeah, see you the next time.